Hello, welcome to the stream. I'm Femi OK. The killing of an Iranian major general has put the US and Iran on the brink of war. But Iraq is the battlefield. So what lies ahead for a country already struggling with a string of domestic problems? Send your thoughts for today's show through Twitter and YouTube, and you could be in it. Iran's targeting of 2 Iraqi military bases hosting US troops has put the world on edge, with fears that Tehran's revenge attack for the US killing of its most important military leader could escalate. But it's Iraq that's in the firing line, and it already has enough problems. Thousands of people across Iraq have mourned Qassem Soleimani and an Iraqi militia commander killed in a US drone attack on Friday. Iraqi Shia parliamentarians have urged foreign troops to leave Iraq, a call the US has rebuffed. But Iraq's politicians are still under pressure at home as demonstrators continue their push for major political and economic reform. For more, we are joined from the northern Iraqi city of Erbil by Kiwa Osman. He's a journalist and analyst. Also on the phone in Baghdad, we have Ayman. He has been part of the protests seeking government reform since October, and we are disguising his identity for his safety. And joining us right here in the studio in Washington, Hilary Mann-Leverett. She is the CEO at Strategia. That's a political risk consulting firm and has served on the White House National Security Council under Presidents Clinton, Bush, and Obama. Hello, everybody. It's good to have you here. Let's go to Erbil in Iraq, first of all, with Hiwa. Hiwa, if you could describe the atmosphere around you in Erbil today, what would you tell us?
Well, generally, people are quite relieved by the size of the attacks. I think initially people were thinking that, listening to what the Grand Ayatollah said in Tehran, that there will be an all-out attack, a major attack, a strong revenge. But this morning, people woke up to the sound of 2 blasts around Erbil. But in the morning, when the pictures came out, they didn't fall on either civilian or military targets. They fell into areas with with no damage at all, with no casualties at all, which was quite a relief for the people. And now everyone is starting to talk about negotiations between Iran and America, and they are hoping that involvement in Iraq, or Iraq as a country, be part of that negotiation between the 2 countries.
Okay.
It is still quite tense, the situation. People are still, we're waiting for the American response to that. Right. But after listening to President Obama, to President Trump,
interesting slip there.
That the worst is behind us, or could be behind us.
Hugh, hold tight for a moment. Hilary, I want to play you something, which is one of our reporters in Iraq on Monday. So this was before these 2 attacks happened on the Iraqi US bases. And this was what people were telling our reporter on Monday.
An uneasy mood has settled over Baghdad. Scarred by decades of intermittent war, people in Iraq's capital know the eerie suspense that precedes one. In coffee shops, old and young alike worry about being caught in the middle as the US and Iran threaten further escalation.
We don't want the battle to come to our country. They want to start a war, they want to settle accounts, but we're the ones who lose young men, lose money, lose infrastructure. We won't benefit from this.
So that was Simone Foltine reporting just earlier on this week. I'm wondering, from the US perspective, are officials thinking about what people down on the ground are going to be feeling, experiencing? Do they have that tension? Do they have that fear in the US?
Well, if they do, and if it's personified in President Trump, it's really a really distorted sense of what's going on the ground. What was astonishing to me was, in response to what's going on and the possibility of US troops being asked to leave Iraq, President Trump said that first Iraq would have to pay us back for the enormous base that we built them, the enormous military base that we built the Iraqis, and they would have to pay us back for the enormous embassy that we built them, as if the Iraqis invited the US invasion into Iraq. So
this is the biggest joke that we ever heard in Iraq, I think since 2003. sorry for jumping, but paying back every cent and every penny that they paid in Iraq. That means that we need to go to America and ask about all the destruction that happened in 2003 and the 1 million people who've been killed. I think this is so ironic to say that. But again, we used to get a lot of jokes from Mr. Trump.
Well,
Hiwa, go ahead.
Yeah.
Hillary, pick up.
My sense is what I'm trying.
I think I have to.
Hiwa, allow Hillary to.
On the issue of America and Iran.
Hiwa, continue.
On the issue of America and Iran, I think the people of Iraq are split into two camps. Some of them, and this is, I think, all of the Kurds, the Sunnis, who both of their MPs boycotted the parliament session that passed a resolution asking for the U.S. to pull out of Iraq. They boycotted the session, and the mood on the street is that the U.S. must stay because Iraq still is unable to stand on its feet because of the threat of ISIS and because of the internal political situation, that it isn't still not mature enough for the people of Iraq to rely on a political process. On the other hand, the demonstrators in Iraq, they want to have a more realistic decision-making process, a more realistic government that doesn't take this, and a more realistic political process that does not take decisions based on high emotions or based on reactions or based on serving the agendas of Tehran against the interest of the Iraqi people. So the move in parliament a few days ago was seen as a pro-Iranian move, and very little of it was to do with actually really wanting America to leave.
Ayman, hold tight for a moment because I've got you speaking over everybody. Hillary, finish the point that you were making originally. Ayman, hold tight for a moment, just a second, so I can hear everybody.
I think an important change is coming in the way that President Trump is trying to change the narrative about Iraq that is incredibly disturbing and important to understand. Americans, I don't think, ever really understood the true mosaic of Iraqi society, the differences, the subtleties, the nuances within Iraqi society. But what President Trump is trying to do now, because he thinks that we're probably going to get expelled from Iraq one way or the other, he is now trying to, in a sense, vilify all Iraqis as ungrateful for the great American sacrifice, everything that the United States, in Trump's view, and what he's trying to change in the narrative that the U.S. has done for Iraqis. And he's doing this by saying Iraq now owes the United States billions of dollars for these military bases, for the embassy that we've built in the heart of Baghdad. He's doing that for a very particular purpose, to change the narrative domestically here in the United States in the lead up to his election campaign coming this November. It's dangerous, it's incendiary, and it has the threat of not just the U.S. and Iran fighting in Iraq, but he's trying to get the Iraqis to appear that they're anti-American, to just show the Iraqis that the United States is leaving in this way.
So, Guess, I just need to show you and our audience this. Have a look here on my laptop. The conversation on YouTube is going so fast that trying to isolate the comments is really difficult. But there's a back and forth going on here. Let me give you an example. You can jump off it now so that I can just pull up a couple of things for you to hear what people are saying in response. Haley Martinez is on YouTube right now. Hello, Haley. I would like to know what the leaders are truly planning and how they feel in regards to recent developments on Trump's behalf. Hillary, you weigh in first of all.
Well, in terms of what Trump is trying to do, I think he is really trying to make this about the United States having done such a great job for Iraq and Iraqis being ungrateful. And he's trying to poison this relationship between the U.S. and Iraq to justify pulling troops out of Iraq. That is going to add fuel to the fire that we already see on the ground.
Ayman, do you feel there's a plan for your leaders? Ayman, is there a plan?
Yeah.
Do you feel that your government has a plan for how to deal with this back and forth between Iran and the US?
The point is, let's just start with something very important, that the government are not united so far. So basically, we have three voices inside the parliament and the government as well. One of which is actually the Kurds, which is actually they have like their own kind of policy and approach. And then you have Sunni as well, who's actually, they're so afraid to see the coalition leaving Iraq in a specific way, Americans as well. And then you have the Shia camp, which is actually, they are so pro-Iranian and they're against, by the end of the day, the American and the coalition presence in Iraq. So it's so divided, especially as we saw like 2 days ago, the parliament session, when we saw only out of 328 members, only 170 showed up, which is all of them was from one bloc, and we know that actually they were all from the Shia bloc. So basically, this is actually the issue that Iraq facing, and the country ended up in a proxy war between Iranians and Americans, and pro-Iranian militias included. And the Iraqi opinion is really stolen, because what we're seeing now, for example, today, after the rocket strike that happened today in Iraq, from the Iranian side, we didn't hear the same voices as the same that would happen with the American strike. That's saying a lot. That's telling us that the governments are not united in their opinion and protecting the sovereignty of the country.
Hugh, I'm just wondering where the anti-government protests are standing right now, where Iraq is under a different kind of a threat because of the back and forth between Iran and the US. I'm going to push that to. I'm going to push that. I'm going to push that to. Ayman, thank you. Thank you. I'm going to share that with that idea with Kiwa. Stand by for a moment, Ayman. Thank you.
The protest started with the slogan "Uridu Watan," I need a homeland. Give us our country back. And one of the behaviors of the Iraqi government that led to these protests is leaning over backwards to countries like Iran, to countries like the United States, whatever they wanted. Part of the failure, big part of the failure of the Iraqi government is not being able to regulate, to create a balanced relationship, neither with Iran nor with the United States of America. Not a single American president who visited Iraq, and almost all of them came on an announced visit. All of them were secret visits. They came in after arrival, the visit was announced, and they go to military bases, meet their soldiers, and then, by the way, some of them call the leaders of the government, others just fly out and leave to other areas. So neither Iran nor America really respected the sovereignty of Iraq as a country. And this is mostly the fault of the government of Iraq. This is on one hand. There's another very important issue on the issue of the parliament's resolution to have the U.S. troops leave the country. The presence of the U.S. troops in Iraq is done by an agreement, security agreement between a fully fledged Iraqi government and the United States, the government of the United States. The current government is a caretaking government. This means it doesn't have the authority of the parliament, and by nature, it is unable to opt out of such agreement. The government that has to renegotiate the security deal with the United States has to be an elected and fully fledged government. The current one is a caretaker one. So that's why really the decision of the parliament is neither here nor there. Especially the fact that we are approaching a snap election very soon. Once we have a prime minister.
All right, the only reason I'm pausing everybody is because there's so much response coming on from people who are watching this show. Hilary, you go first, and I'm going to put a couple of these points to you from online.
I think the point is very important that for President Trump, and I think maybe unfortunately for Americans even more broadly than that, the relevance of Iraq as an individual sovereign country is really falling by the wayside. And I think that was dramatically shown in President Trump's response this morning to the Iranian retaliation for the killing of Qassem Soleimani and the other Iraqis who were in his party. Trump said this morning that it really wasn't a big deal. They just struck Iraq. They just struck Iraq.
Yeah.
I want that to resonate for everybody. They just struck Iraq. And for me, some of my colleagues here were saying, well, were there any American casualties when they first heard the news?
Yes.
And I said, well, no, I hear there are no American casualties. And I hear there were no Iraqi casualties. And the response was, well, that doesn't really matter. The concern was only about American casualties in the sovereign country of Iraq.
This is being reflected online. So Matar Sonko here on Twitter says, this is definitely unacceptable. Iraq should not be a battleground for the United States and Iran. Iraqis have suffered wars and they just want to rebuild their country and live in peace. And then this one right now, Emmanuel is actually watching as we're speaking here. I think the US is overstepping its boundaries. Why can't the US withdraw and leave issues concerning in the Middle East for Middle East countries to deal with? Well, that's a question that's been going on for decades.
Yes,
Why
yes.
not?
Well, there are two important reasons. I mean, for Trump personally, it would be humiliating. So he wants to leave in a way where he is he's done something great for his base here in the United States. But more importantly, what is fundamental to understand is the United States has never really sought peace and stability, because if there really were peace and stability, Iraq would be critically important as a major Arab military. It could have thousands of men under arms with an incredible military. The United States doesn't want that. We do not want independent Arab power. So Iraq, as a fully functioning, stable state with a full military, the United States isn't interested. We're not interested in that many other countries having fully independent power either. That's why after World War II, it was so important that both Japan and Germany be demilitarized in order to allow them to grow as economic powers. That's really the only way that the United States, in terms of its power politics, can think about the Middle East, if it's completely neutered of any military independence.
I want to show.
Well, this is exactly why.
And here, let me just add another thought in, and then you can just jump off the back of that thought. Because we also approached another analyst who is based in Iraq to see what his perspective might be about where do we go next. I'm just going to push everybody forward and then have a listen to Qassem Haddad before we pick up our conversation.
Despite the events that happened on January 3rd that gravely impacts Iran, I still believe Iraq is able to plot its own independent course. Just know with the current government and leadership it has, it would require strong leadership that has vision for this country to implement policy that would be free of foreign meddling.
Hiwa, go ahead.
Well, see, this is exactly why the protests that took place in Iraq on October 1st last year were very important, because the demands that they had was to bring some sense into the politics of Iraq, and they called for good governance. And a key issue of good governance is to almost entirely change the current political class of the country by changing the electoral law. They have made some progress. The electoral law was changed from a list system into a district system with first past the post voting, and election in terms of the results and who wins the seat to parliament. These things are all attempts to try and bring in a more representative government, a government that is not been installed by deals between Iran and the United States. So far in Iraq, since 2003, every prime minister we had, there had to be an agreement between Iran and the United States over, or at least neither side shouldn't oppose. And with this kind of in this kind of selection process, whoever comes to power will be weak, will be indebted to either Tehran or to Washington, and they would not really have the interests of the country at heart as a priority, as we have seen. I mean, the Prime Minister yesterday, he receives a phone call from the Iranians that they are going to bomb, and then he receives another phone call from the Americans. He became like a phone operator. This is not the job of a Prime Minister, to receive phone calls and say, I'm gonna be bombing your country. He should be having a much stronger stance. He should not be listening to the hardliners or the pro-Iranian militias who are bullying the political process in Iraq and trying to push things in their direction or in the direction that satisfies Iran. And they break hell loose when Iran attacks, when America attacks Qassem Soleimani on Iraqi land, but then they do nothing when it comes to Iran attacking U.S. bases in Iraq. So there is a really weak government here in Iraq, and this is exactly why the protests are ongoing, and they will only become stronger. But the serious worry now for everybody.
He will take a pause for a moment. I hear Ayman, and I want to get that protester voice into the conversation, and also show you right now. Just have a look at what's happening here on YouTube. The conversation is moving so quickly and so fast. Ayman, I'm going to pull out one comment there from YouTube, and that is Jeremy Cookson's. He says that there are two factors in Iraq, and the people are split, and it's annoying to him that the media isn't representing this. Is there anything else in the way that you're seeing the media covering what is happening between Iran and Iraq and the US that you really want to tell our international community? Very briefly, go ahead.
Let's face something very important, that actually on the political arena in Iraq, the main actor is actually Iran. Since 2003, when America changed the regime without any exit plan, Iran took over all the political arena in Iraq, and they grow up a huge network of politicians with actually 100% loyal to Iran, and they are passing and they're delivering all the messages that Iran wants in the MENA region. And we're talking about these countries, Iraq, Syria, and Lebanon, and Yemen as well. So what we actually, the first demonstration that happened, not only in 2018, let's go back to the roots, and we would see there's a protest and there's demonstrations happened in 2014, 2015, 16, 17, and there's 18, and there's 19 as well. If you go to the headlines, we're always seeing that there's a people who are demanding to stop the Iranian, the huge influence on the Iraqi political arena. And this is actually what we wanted to stop since on the 1st of October. Now the agenda is a little bit changed. The demands, they are still the same, but we moved it to another level, which is stop being Iraq as a proxy country that America and Iran can solve their problems here. So, and the sovereignty of the country. We are expecting a huge demonstration is going to be happening on the 9th, which is going to be this Friday, and you will see what actually kind of demands it will be on that day.
All right, Ayman, I'm going to leave it there because we do not know. We are ahead of time there, so thank you for that, for telling us about the protests still continuing. Hilary, via this tweet here from Sawa Nasri, he says, in my opinion, Iran meddling into the affairs in Iraq has created the chaotic situation. Iraq has lost its identity. It's now become an Iranian launch pad with sectarian conflicts that rock the country. No one wants a stable Iraq, especially the neighbours. So that's his perspective. I am just wondering, knowing from your government experience, from administrations from both sides of the aisle, what is happening in the State Department today?
They're very concerned that the project, the American project in Iraq, is really about to collapse. Now, I think for many outside of the State Department, the idea that the United States invaded this country in 2003 and therefore is not responsible for any of the problems is a little bit, would be a little bit odd. And the idea that there are Americans that are invested in the success of Iraq would similarly be odd. But there is a generation since 2003 of American diplomats, of American soldiers, of Americans across the government spectrum who have invested, who have gone on 2 or 3 tours of duty, whether for the military or the diplomatic corps, who feel an investment in Iraq and see it really on the precipice of collapse today.
All right, I want to show you this right here as we continue to look at the conversation that continues here online. I just want to get a closing thought from Hiwa, and I mean in a sentence, because you are reporting this story from inside Iraq. What are you expecting to happen next? In a sentence, Hiwa.
Well, what people of Iraq are hoping not to happen is that if this saga between Iran and the United States continues, the pro-Iranian proxies in Iraq who have been killing protesters, who have been trying to overcome the protesters, are bolstered, are empowered, and they can take over the process in the country because they are the hardliners.
Hiwa, thank you so much for joining us. Hilary, we always appreciate your analysis. And Ayman, who is a protester in Iraq, thank you again for joining us as well. And for everybody who's online, the conversation continues on YouTube, on Twitter, and any digital platform you can reach us. Take care. Thanks for watching.